If you're familiar with the image of the vesica is two overlapping circles that create an almond shape between the two. The two circles are two complementary polarities. And when two complementary polarities overlap, the place that they overlap becomes a merging, a meeting ground, a gateway that brings the best of both parts together. Those two complementary polarities are spiritual science and vibrational science. The spiritual science is primarily focused on the cumulative knowledge and practices for human spiritual and consciousness development of traditions all over the world. The vibrational science has to do with the work with energy, and how this work with energy, again from many different traditions around the world, can be a support for all of our spiritual and consciousness development. The two always merge together, and in classical traditions all over the world, they always used vibrational methods not only for healing, but for higher level spiritual activations as well. From the perspective of many classical traditions, healing is the first stage. Healing is simply the act of becoming whole and coherent enough to be able to do the more advanced work, to transform oneself permanently. And this has to do with creating new structures in the human subtle body. The structures in the human subtle body are the only thing we will take with us through the gate of death. They're the only things that permanently become part of us. There's a concept that I refer to as the number prism, that to understand any phenomena, what we do in a modern scientific approach is we divide it into its component parts. And so what you'll find in India, for example, to understand healing vibrations, they tend to divide them into three different parts. And they'll talk about the three gunas. They'll talk about vata and pitta and kapha. These are threefold division. In the West, there'd often be a fourfold division of the four elements. In China, a fivefold division of the five elements. Well, there was an interesting statement by the great Rosicrucian teacher Rudolf Steiner, where he said to fully understand any system in the world and to be able to differentiate out every one of its core aspects requires at minimum a 12-fold division. This is a classical teaching from great spiritual and healing traditions in the world. That's why there are 12 disciples around the Christ, why there are 12 imams in Shia Islam, while there are a division of the stars into 12 signs of the zodiac around the sun. It's 12 around the one. For those of you that know sacred geometry, and you look at how a cube is structured, a cube is the form that gives rise to matter. The cube has 12 lines that define the cube. If you look at a sphere, you can fit exactly 12 spheres around a central sphere. Again, 12 around the one. To be able to understand all these different world systems and put them into a common unified system, I was looking for a method to be able to differentiate out the 12 core aspects within vital energy. To lead to the discussion directly of this, I want to give a frame of reference of what we have done to create modern technology. Because sometimes we take for granted that we live in an age of technological miracles. We just are so exposed to it every day we don't think about it anymore. But the world has been completely transformed in the last 100 years. Through discoveries that have taken place over the last 150 years. Now, what I'm referring to here is that to have a science, you need to be able to differentiate any aspect of things into its component parts. You need to have a spectrum, what we would call spectrum analysis. So one of the first breakthroughs that we had was the identification of every type of matter that exists in the physical world. In the ancient world, you never had that. So we live in a material world, but we didn't know what all the different pieces of matter were until the latter part of the 1800s with the identification of the periodic table of elements. What we call the periodic table of elements is really the identification of the complete spectrum of matter itself. Now we can be fully conscious of everything that makes up the physical world. That opened up everything in material science for all of our modern technology. So what you find in many classical traditions is that they will talk about different levels of creation. So there's the physical level, there's the etheric life energy level, that in China would be called qi, or in Japan would be called ki, or in India would be called prana. The Greeks would call it the ether. So this etheric vital force energy is above that of the physical. Then there are consciousness levels, beginning with what we call in the West the astral level. Well, with all these different levels, we have to understand a progression that is taking place in modern science. And to do that, I think it's very helpful to review a particular concept coming from Rudolf Steiner. Rudolf Steiner mentioned at one time that people don't properly understand what electromagnetic energy is, because time and time again in subtle energy research in modern times, things dealing with etheric life force, with chi, we try to get validity from modern science by saying the vital life force is electromagnetic. But in fact, according to Steiner, electromagnetic energy is not the vital life force. If it was, you could plug the base of your spine into an electrical outlet and get charged up. But it doesn't work that way. There's a vibrational component in electromagnetic energy that is extremely toxic. And that's why people get electrosensitivity and have detrimental effects from electrical fields. What the vital life force is, that's above the level of the physical, in every classical tradition, they understood that this vital life force is what went into the physical and animated it. It's the animating power. So when we understand that, we'll understand that when that power has animated the physical body through what the Chinese call the universal chi field, or what the Greeks would call the ether, that animation process creates resistance passing through the conductor of the human body, passing through the conductor of physical materials, and that means that this faster than light energy slows way down. And this particular energy from the ether begins to decay. The decay of the etheric energy, of the vital force energy, is what we call electromagnetic energy. That's why Nikola Tesla, in his work, said, well, today in technology, we worked with retarded Hertzian waves that are slower than light. But Tesla, in the 1890s, said there's another type of wave, scalar waves, that are faster than light. And that's the real thing behind the electromagnetic energy. So for what I'm about to describe to you, the concept is then that our electromagnetic energy is in fact decayed life force. It's the decayed vital energy that animates living beings. But it became a shadow substance in electromagnetic energy. Now it becomes gross enough, it becomes dense enough that we can use it to do things like turn a physical motor and create our modern technology. Hard to do that with the ether. You can animate a living being. And it's said that some traditions have been able to harness the ether to be able to turn motors. And there's a lot of work going on in this field today in things like the Tesla Society. But that gross level of the energy and electromagnetic energy is what we use in modern technology. But here's the problem, that when we have the mastery of the electromagnetic spectrum and of the spectrum of matter, the periodic table, all of our technology today is based on how we stick this electromagnetic energy into specific pieces of physical matter, into silicon doped with germanium or whatever it might be, to hold a specific frequency. But what they ignore is what about the next level up? Because after the electromagnetic, which Steiner would call sub-nature or sub-physical, and then the physical level, then you have the vital life force. We should be aware that every major spiritual tradition on the planet, every traditional culture until about 300 years ago, all over the world, always focused their healing on the vital life force. That's true in every culture. It's only a very modern development to focus only on the physical body and claim there is no vital life force. These types of vibrations created by this technology are going to affect the vital life force level. So that vital life force level has got to come in to a new, more expanded scientific form of understanding. It goes back to ancient times, goes back to the ancient Egyptian temple science, goes back to the work of the Jesuits in the Catholic tradition. And this is not some conspiracy theory. This is actually coming from writings of Jesuit-trained French priests who wrote in French in the early 1900s and who wrote books about this. Then came into France, was given out to the public as an actual method to detect subtle vibrations, and then was taken further by people like Louis Turin. So as far as I'm concerned, this was a gigantic development in subtle energy work, to be able to differentiate the complete spectrum of all subtle energies into 12 parts. Now here's the thing. These 12 vibrations that make up the complete spectrum of subtle energy, the exact same way that the electromagnetic spectrum shows the complete spectrum of electromagnetic energy, these energies were described for simplicity by the French in terms of colors, because all of these subtle vibrations, they may be completely invisible, or that vibration can appear in any quality scale. What do I mean by a quality scale? A quality scale is shape or sound, or movement, or angle, or color, or proportion. All of these are qualities. There are healers who use only light and color. There are healers who use only sound. There's healers that use only angles. There are healers that use only numbers. All of these are quality scales to express the complete spectrum of vibrational forces. There are ways this can be engineered and activated, and they use this all the time in the ancient world. So the French, in their work in the 1930s, identified the way that the 12 bands of vibration that they had detected, which are all of the polarized energies in the world, all the things that create one specific power. It's hot versus cold. It's light versus dark. These different specialized powers of the 12, it's the connection to the original unified source. It's unity. Every one of these 12 bands is a divine power from the unified source, from the Godhead, from a divine beginning that has to do with all the subtle energies that create life and life functions in the world. These are the subtle energies, the complete spectrum of them. With that, these means that these are all specific divine powers. Each one of the bands has a divine power. This then brings us to understanding the powers that are inherent in vibrations for things like vibrational healing, vibrational medicine. And one of the great references that we use today is the field of cymatics. Cymatics shows you how sound vibrations shape matter. So for example, if you have powder on a flexible membrane, or you have a liquid or a paste or an oil, or all these things that, not coincidentally, also correspond to certain substances in the human body, and you then apply a vibration to it, then that vibration, as soon as the sound hits the material is free enough to form into a specific shape, a specific mandala like this. And what you see in the cymatics work is that the moment you change the sound vibration, the visible shape changes. If you go to YouTube, there are all kinds of free videos on YouTube showing you Hans Jenny's original work, showing you a lot of modern stuff. People are even using this to create specific geometric patterns in fire. And what this means is if you can find the right sound vibration, you can find exactly the sound vibration that will resonate matter to create a specific function, including in living beings. From the work of Hans Jenny, where he was able to identify all of these powerful vibrations and the shapes they create, and I want to mention to you that one of the things he discovered is that when you apply the sound vibration, it'll take the two-dimensional surface of the liquid, the paste, the powder, etc., immediately form a perfect mandala. But he found if you take 5 vibrations and you combine 5 vibrations together, then you could get the powder on the plate to come together, rise up vertically, and move like a living being. And there's pictures of this in his films. So it's with the combinations of sound vibrations. One alone is not going to give you the full effect. You have to have the right combination of the vibrations together. We need to be aware that stones are the most stable form of vibration in the world. Maybe you work with plants for healing, that's great, but how long will the plant hold potency? Once it's been prepared, it may be for some months, maybe for some years. But stones can hold the same vibration for millions of years. Stones are the most stable form of the crystallization of higher divine vibrations into the physical plane. That was understood by every classical tradition on the planet because they all use stones for spiritual and healing purposes. So this means that there's something to the use of stones and minerals, often far beyond what we find in modern popular books on the subject. They can allow us to access some very, very high forces. So this means we need to reclaim the lost knowledge of the use of these stones and apply that in modern times. Now, one of the best developments in recent times for getting some of the ancient stone knowledge out in a very deep form, far beyond what we had in North America before, is the work of a Taoist teacher in North America whose name is Jeffrey Yuan. Yuan is Y-U-E-N. Jeffrey Yuan, one thing that he's really brought back is the concept of stone medicine. And it's hardly known today in the West that the Taoist tradition in China had as fully developed a stone medicine as they have a plant medicine. Because the only thing we got in North America was the plant medicine. Why? Because it was similar to our use of pharmaceutical drugs. The stone medicine, completely ignored. So Jeffrey Yuan has helped to bring this work back of the deep Taoist knowledge. And mostly you have to go to live classes with him to get this knowledge because he does the classic Taoist thing of just oral transmission. But some of his students are starting to make books about the work or to teach the work secondarily. I've studied with multiple people that he's taught. I've studied with him directly. And one book I had mentioned to you, there's the book called Stone Medicine. That book is the first thing in print in English describing some of the teachings of Jeffrey Ewan. I expect there to be others. There's some very, very deep knowledge there. The challenge of it is that some of this material, you need to have a background in Chinese medicine to understand what he's talking about. And those of you that know about Marcel Vogel knew that he was a brilliant IBM scientist who did great work with crystals in the 1980s. He died in the early 90s. And Marcel Vogel's work had to do with the right way to be able to cut a crystal so it would have a specific type of resonance to it. Now the tragedy, and Marcel himself used to lament this. I remember when I would take classes with him back in the 80s. He would lament the fact that they are now selling on the market all kinds of things that are poorly cut crystals to be double terminated and calling them Vogel crystals. He'd say these things don't have an energy anywhere near a Vogel crystal. They're not cut properly at all. You have to cut the crystal along its axis of growth, because that's the way of the natural energy conduction. All these cheap crystals that are on the market today being called Vogel crystals, and they're being mass cut in Brazil. They're not cut along the proper energy axis, and they're not cut with the proper methods. There are still people who are trained by Marcel Vogel that are cutting and selling these things, including the guy that I do my cutting for me in California, whose name is Drew Towsley. And so this is a real Vogel crystal, cut the way that Vogel intended, an 8-sided Vogel crystal, and it has to have specific angles in it that were angles that Marcel found would actually resonate the internal matrix of the crystal, which, by the way, also resonate the interior of the water molecule. So the crystal and the water molecule's inner lattice are deeply connected at particular angles. And so by vibrating that has a very strong effect on the life energy of the body that just any random so-called Vogel cut with double termination does not have. Plus he worked on the particular way that they would be designed to help to take human thought and manifest it into energy. Transformation of thought to energy. This is the form of the Vogel crystal, but I want to contrast that and make clear the difference between it and a master cut prana crystal. Now, the prana crystal is based on the design given out by Master Choa Kok Sui from the pranic healing tradition. And in pranic healing, they do a lot of bioenergy projection of energy. And with that, they didn't want the back termination when they're projecting energy out the front. Now that's when they are using it to pull toxic energy out of the human body, because then as you're pulling the toxic energy out, you may get a spray of the energy out of the back termination. So I want you to be clear about the difference between that design and the pranic healing design used by pranic healers who might work on people's energy fields with bioenergy for 6 to 8 hours a day. And then when they extract the toxic energy out of a person's field, it doesn't come out the back end the same way. And they use crystals very commonly in pranic healing for this purpose because it allows the person to work for much longer and not get the toxic energy from the client in their own field, and it makes the work much more powerful. And what I found is that by combining some of the Vogel methods and cutting with some of the information from biogeometry and other vibrational testing, such as the power of the number 16, power of the number 19, get these crystals with 16 or 19 facets, then you get a sweet spot of energy that is extremely powerful. Then there's the aspect of the different types of vibrational qualities that are held in the stones. Dr. Karim had found the energy of the center, what he calls the BG3. The French had found the energy of the 12 band. So that raised the question, what were the master tonic stones? What were the adaptogenic stones? Now that we had a method to test it vibrationally, we could see what stones have unusual amounts of that centering vibration, and that being combined alchemically with these other band qualities. So I'm going to show you just a couple of crystals that I found with this quality. One very interesting one is one I refer to as iron rose quartz. Iron rose quartz is deposits of hematite, natural iron, inside of rose quartz. This particular stone only comes from one deposit in Madagascar. And what you find with this is that if you test hematite, natural iron, and in Chinese medicine and stone medicine, they are wild about hematite, because hematite has a fantastic effect. Iron has a great effect, that it pulls the energy in the human system that can begin to build up in the chest and the head and cause all types of health problems, it pulls it down to where it needs to go in the lower abdomen, what they call the lower dantian. And then rose quartz, beautiful stone, full of rose or pink vibration. In this place in Madagascar, nature alchemically merged the iron, the hematite, with the rose quartz and developed this particular stone. And when it combined them, it got very, very strong centering vibration that neither stone alone has. This is the great thing about alchemical design. You can get multiple components that don't have a particular vibrational band or don't have strong centering vibration, but if you combine them properly, bam, an alchemical change where you now have very strong centering vibration and sometimes potentially new bands that never existed before. So the effect of this iron rose quartz is that it creates a strengthening, balancing effect in the human energy field, pulls the energy down that's stuck up too high in the body, down to the lower abdomen, the way the iron does, but balances the energy field at the same time with the much greater amount of the centering vibration, and at the same time adds in this heart resonance and energy with the rose quartz. So this is an adaptogenic stone. Now, the problem with this is that most of this stone that's sold today has all been artificially heated and has taken away a huge amount of its benefit. Sometimes when I test it, like 90% of its benefit's gone because it's artificially heated, and it looks much brighter red when it's artificially heated. That's why they heat it. It's like, oh, look how red this is. Why would you want that when you can get that? Well, the reason is that this is full of beneficial vibrations. The other stuff has been killed. This is the real thing, the one that hasn't been heated. And this is the golden form of it. Why is it yellow? Because it has more water in it. It still has that strong centering vibration, but now its energy has been shifted more toward the yellow band from the red band. And when that happens, one of the effects of this is that with the extra water in it, what it does is that it moves the chi energy in the body much faster because of the water held inside of it. So this will circulate the energy faster. This has a bit more vital force in it. Another stone that I really like is one called indigo gabbro. Indigo gabbro is sold mostly commercially under the name Mystic Merlinite, and when it's sold under the name Mystic Merlinite, the price is usually about 4 times higher. But the original name of it is indigo gabbro. And it's indigo because it's kind of purpley, and it's gabbro because gabbro is an incredible mineral that's similar to basalt. And what's amazing about it is that the foundation of the world's oceans, what's beneath the world's oceans, is gabbro. This is a specific type of this basaltic type of stone, gabbro, again from one specific location in Madagascar that I believe is a sacred power spot because of its energy. It fused together all these different minerals into the gabbro deposit and created extremely strong centering vibration. What I also find with it is that it has very strong energy of indigo and violet. Indigo is one of the rarest of the vibrations. You rarely find it. In natural sources, indigo vibration tends to break down very quickly into other energies. So to find stable sources of the indigo vibration, it's the rarest of all the 12 bands. There's something alchemical, has to do with transmutation in that indigo band. And when you combine it with the violet band, like it is in this stone, when you test it energetically, it doesn't look violet, it doesn't matter what it looks like, it's the vibration coming off of it. The combination of the centering vibration with the indigo and the violet gives it the capacity to absorb toxic vibrations out of the human body, out of a location, out of an item. This one, up to a certain level, can absorb toxic energy and do a type of transmutation where you can pick up the toxic vibration it's taking out of a toxic system and then check it a little bit later. The toxic vibration is gone and now it has more of that centering vibration coming out. It can literally transmute the detrimental vibration. It does it better than any other stone I've identified for that transmutation of detrimental vibration to beneficial. So it's called indigo gabbro. I use the slab type form for putting on the top of wireless routers, toxic earth energy lines, electromagnetic sources, putting things on top of because it's a flat polished surface. I use the obelisk form to create a standing pillar of that vibration in a location. One other one that's really fascinating, and that is aquamarine. Aquamarine is referred to in Chinese as the pillar stone. It is a stone that is known in Chinese internal alchemy for being used at 3 different stages of alchemical transformation of the human energy and consciousness system. Now, what's fascinating about this is that there's been recent scientific research talking about inside of beryl stones. Beryls are a class of stones, and aquamarine is a beryl. But they actually found this and identified it in aquamarines. That within aquamarine, inside the beryls, is a state of matter that's supposed to not exist in the physical world. It's called quantum tunneling, where particles of matter can exist in multiple states and locations at the exact same time. And I believe this is directly related to indications from the Chinese Taoist tradition about this being an alchemical stone, because it seems to have an aspect of its forces are in multiple locations at once in a way that the scientific articles say cannot exist in the physical world. It's a purely quantum phenomena.